Hey there, I'm super excited to share today's video with you because we're going to dive into something that can make a huge difference in the quality of your music production. Prepare your tracks for a mixing engineer. Now, you might be wondering why this is such a big deal. Properly preparing your tracks before sending them off to a mixing engineer can not only save you time and money, but it can also contribute to the final sound of your music. So if you've ever been curious about how to get your tracks ready for the mixing process, you're in the right place. In this video, we'll cover all the essential steps you need to take to make sure your tracks are in the best possible shape before sending them off. But before we begin, if you're interested in mixing and mastering services for your music, check out my website at fernadas.com. Here you'll find all the infos you need to work with me, including sound examples, rates, and contact options. I'll leave a link in the description below. Now, let's begin with the video. Alright, so one of the first and most important things to consider is a file format. In general, I recommend that you export your tracks at 48 kHz 24-bit WAV files. This is the industry standard and is widely accepted by mix engineers. So you're safe using these settings. It's also important to note that you should export your tracks at the same resolution that they were recorded in. For example, if you recorded your tracks at 44.1 16-bit resolution, there is no benefit to exporting them at a higher resolution. But in case you already finished your song and you did record it at, say, 44.1 16-bit, just export them at that resolution. But it's always good idea to be aware of this and consider recording at a high resolution next time. Like I said, you'll be fine using 48 kHz 24-bit. Another important aspect of preparing your tracks is file labeling. This might seem like a small detail, but trust me, it can make a big difference in the efficiency of a mixing process. There's nothing more frustrating than opening a folder and seeing that there are a lot of unorganized files with names like audio 345687. You know how it is. Then having to listen to all your files and come up with names can be very consuming and kill the vibes of a good mixing day. That being said, here are some tips for labeling your files. First, it's a good idea to put all your files in a folder with a clear and organized naming convention. For example, typical thing to do is to include the artist name and the name of a song and the tempo in the folder name. This will make it easy to find all of the files needed and keep everything organized. When it comes to individual file names, it's best to avoid putting the song name or artist name on them. Instead of having super long names like this, use short and descriptive names like snare, kick, bass, guitar, and so on. This will make it easier for the mixing engineer to quickly identify each file and know exactly what it is. Overall, taking the time to label your files clearly and consistently will save you and your mixing engineer a lot of time and hassle, and ultimately lead to a more smoother and more successful mixing process. Now, let's move to one of the most important questions of preparing your tracks. Should you leave your audio processing like EQs and compression on or turn them off? The answer to this question is that it ultimately depends on your personal preference and the specific situation. Some engineers will ask you to turn off all of your processing. For me personally, I think it's a better idea to leave most of your processing on. And I'll give you a couple of reasons why. In general, it's a good practice to leave on any processing that you're happy with. This way, I would start working where you left off and enhance what you already have. The idea here is not to start from the very beginning. It's important to keep in mind that no matter how hard I try, it can be almost impossible to recreate exactly what you had in your mix if you turn off all of your processing. So if you're happy with any of your sounds, I think it's a better idea to export them as they are. On the other hand, if you are not sure about any of the processing you've done, it might be a good idea to turn it off and let the mixing engineer make their own decisions. But if you want to be extra safe, you could also send 2 copies of a specific track. one with processing on and the other dry. This will give your mix engineer room to decide whether he or she wants to recreate what you already had, use it as it is, or blend it in with other processing. This will give more options to work with and help to make the best decisions for the final mix. What's important here is to remember to label your versions properly. For example, you could use lead vocal dry and lead vocal wet. And by the way, if you have effects tracks like delays or reverbs, don't forget to also include them with all of your other tracks. Finally, there's one more important point to keep in mind when preparing your tracks. All tracks should be exported from the same start point on the timeline, so they're all synchronized. This means that you should make sure that all your tracks are aligned to the same starting point before exporting them. If your tracks are not synchronized, it means that the mixer will have to align them manually, risking that they won't be perfectly aligned at the end. Or you'll have to export them all over again. So take the time to make sure that everything is aligned before exporting your tracks. One thing I like to do after exporting a project is to create a new session and import all of the files. Then have a listen to it and check if everything is working properly. In conclusion, by following these guidelines for file format, labeling, audio processing, and synchronization, you can ensure that your tracks are well prepared for the mixing process and give your mixing engineer everything they need to create a high-quality final mix. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comment section below. I hope you found this video useful and wish you lots of fun with your music. See you soon.